Committee on Homeland Security will come to order. Without objection, the chair may declare the committee in recess at any point. Without objection, the gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Clark, and the gentleman from Puerto Rico, Mr. Hernandez, are permitted to sit on the dais and ask questions of witnesses.
Thanks.
The purpose of this hearing is to evaluate the effectiveness of the federal cyber regulatory regime and to identify opportunities to harmonize cyber regulations across the federal government. Specifically, we will examine the challenges that private sector owners and operators of critical infrastructure face while navigating cyber regulatory regime, including the potential impact of the final CERCIA rule if it does not meet congressional intent. I now recognize myself for an opening statement. Good morning. I'm honored to serve as chairman of this subcommittee again in the 119th Congress. Ranking Member Swalwell, it's great to serve alongside you for another term. I'd also like to welcome all of our members returning and the new ones that are here. I'm looking forward to working with all of you and to making this a productive Congress. As cyber threats to information technology and operational technology increase, we must work hard to ensure cybersecurity is front and center on Congress's agenda. Until we change our cybersecurity posture, we'll continue to see rogue nation-state actors target our nation's critical infrastructure. In that spirit, I am pleased to kick off this Congress with a bipartisan priority that is vital to our nation's security: regulatory harmonization. For too long, we have talked about the cumbersome nature of cyber regulatory regime without seeing the changes necessary to solve it. In fact, the Biden administration tried to add more regulations on sectors such as healthcare and water. While it is important for the federal government to work with those sectors that are not as cyber mature, more regulation is not the answer. With over 50 regulations at the federal level alone, it is time to streamline requirements to ensure they promote useful, actionable, and reasonable information sharing within the time frame requested. When organizations face their most vulnerable moment, they should only be thinking about one thing: securing their networks. Hours of duplicative compliance tasks and hundreds of thousands of dollars invested to navigate the landscape must come to an end. With the beginning of the new administration, we have an opportunity to reset the regulatory regime once and for all. In 2022, Congress passed landmark legislation to streamline cyber incident reporting, the Cyber Incident Reporting for Critical Infrastructure Act of 2022, or CERCIA. This directed CISA to develop regulations to set an acceptable standard for cyber incident reporting across all 16 critical infrastructure sectors. Unfortunately, as many of today's witnesses reinforced last year, the scope of the proposed CERCIA rule went far beyond congressional intent. Knowing that the deadline for the final rule is approaching, we will dig into the value of CERCIA and what the future of the rule should look like. This new administration presents an opportunity to get cyber incident reporting right. We should seize it. Beyond CERCIA, different regulatory agencies have imposed rules that directly contradict congressional intent with CERCIA. Securities and Exchange Commission's rules on cybersecurity risk management, strategy, governance, and incident disclosure are a perfect example of how rulemaking should not be done. That is, without buy-in from their key stakeholders, industry, and Congress. As we strive for regulatory harmonization, collaboration across the public and private sector is vital. We cannot allow malicious cyber actors to get ahead of us because paperwork holds us back from effective cyber risk management, mitigation, and response. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses about the steps we can take to finally achieve regulatory harmonization. I now recognize the ranking member for an opening statement.
Thank the chairman, and excited to begin this new Congress again with the chairman. It's not a great place to be in the minority, but if you have a chairman like Mr. Garbarino on your subcommittee, it's a great place to get things done, and that's our mission here, is to get things done for the good of our constituents and the security of the people and companies we represent. This first hearing is focused on a bipartisan priority: identifying opportunities to improve implementation of the Cyber Incident Reporting for Critical Infrastructure Act, CERCIA, and the need to harmonize cyber regulations. Before I begin, though, I did want to take a moment to recognize and express my condolences to the family, friends, and constituents of Congressman Sylvester Turner, who passed away last week. He was a member of this subcommittee, and his passion for cybersecurity, whether it was as the mayor of one of America's largest cities in Houston, that was clear, also as a member of Congress serving on a committee that works on that. And it was clear during his first two full committee hearings last month, and we'll miss his contributions that he made and would have made to this subcommittee. Turning to the subject of today's hearing, I agree that compliance costs can outweigh the security benefit of regulations when compliance with duplicative regulations cuts into investment and security. We should not be imposing regulations for the sake of imposing regulations. Security should be designed to achieve outcomes that are proven to reduce risk and improve resilience and security. Toward that end, I am pleased to support CERCIA because it addressed a concrete security gap and will improve the government's ability to detect and disrupt malicious cyber activity. It also put in place a framework that ensures covered entities would not need to report the same cyber incidents multiple times to multiple regulators. If a hacker gets into a bank or energy company, we want them to focus on eradicating the threat as quickly as possible, not huddling the lawyers and compliance experts. It should be fixing the problem and reestablishing their services. I'm troubled that the proposed rule does not incorporate the feedback that the private sector provided during the RFI process. Congress put CISA in charge of the cyber incident reporting rule because it has a record of working collaboratively with the private sector, and our intent was that CISA would engage the private sector to develop a workable rule. Together with Ranking Member Thompson and my colleague, Congresswoman Clark, I submitted comments on the proposed rule urging CISA to more carefully scope the entities, incidents, and information that must be reported. I've also called on CISA to establish an ex parte process to facilitate ongoing engagements with the private sector. With the fall 2025 deadline for issuing a final rule looming, I urge CISA to work quickly to re-engage with the private sector and refine the scope of this rule. There are also 3 key pieces of cybersecurity legislation that I urge this committee to pass as quickly as possible. First, we must authorize the Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative, CISA's operational and collaboration hub. Formal authorization of the JCDC will provide much-needed transparency regarding who can be a member and the activities JCDC takes on. We passed this in a bipartisan manner last Congress with support of the chairman of the whole committee, and I hope that authorization this Congress will restore trust among JCDC participants and focus JCDC on the activities most likely to drive security benefits. Relatedly, the Cyber Information Sharing Act of 2015 is set to expire at the end of September. The bill is the foundational collaboration between the government and the private sector, and it must be reauthorized. As it relates to CISA and some of the firings that we've seen there, I want to make sure that we get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse. The government should be efficient and not waste your money. That is a priority of mine. It's a priority of most of my colleagues. However, we must be especially careful when any cut goes to public safety, national security, or cybersecurity, because we know that we are more vulnerable than ever to a cyber attack, and we want to make sure that we have the best folks on guard working hand in hand with the private sector to make sure we're best protected. Finally, state and local cybersecurity grant programs will expire on September 30. The grant program has helped state and local governments across the country improve their ability to defend against and become resilient to sophisticated cyber attacks from our adversaries and other criminals. Again, I thank my colleagues for their commitment to moving the ball forward on cybersecurity, and I look forward to working with each of you and our witnesses to do that. Mr. Chairman, again, I'm looking forward to this Congress and what we can do together, and this is an appropriate way to kick off this subcommittee, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize the chairman of the full committee, Mr. Green, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Garbarino and Ranking Member. Good to see you guys today. Today's hearing serves as a crucial opportunity to examine the effectiveness of federal cyber bureaucracy. At a time when cyber attacks are growing more frequent and sophisticated, it's imperative that our regulatory process governing cyberspace is strengthened and harmonized. This will promote security and cooperation while minimizing cost and confusion. Last May, this subcommittee held a hearing focused on CERCIA, Cyber Incident Reporting for Critical Infrastructure Act of 2022. CERCIA, among other things, directed CISA to create and implement regulations for cyber incident reporting across 16 critical infrastructure sectors. Although Congress passed CERCIA nearly 3 years ago, widespread regulatory disharmony persists throughout the cyber incident reporting and response regime. There are now at least 50 cyber incident reporting requirements in effect across the federal government. These regulations are often duplicative and complex, requiring private sector owners and operators to invest significant sums into regulatory compliance rather than security. This patchwork of conflicting and complex regulations place a significant burden on reporting entities. Let's be clear, improving our nation's cyber regulatory regime will bolster our nation's security. Current cyber incident reporting regulations require too much of the private sector, drawing their attention away from actually securing their networks. Federal regulations like the SEC's Public Cyber Disclosure Rule clearly illustrate the urgent need for harmonization. This rule in particular is riddled with ambiguity and sets constrictive reporting timelines for organizations that experience cyber incidents. Ambiguous and conflicting standards like the SEC rule are allowing compliance to take a priority over security, leaving our critical infrastructure more vulnerable to subsequent attacks. Injecting consistency and efficiency into the cyber regulatory regime is necessary to protect our nation from digital threats to our critical infrastructure. The security of our homeland depends on effective cooperation between the private and public sectors, and it is our duty to help remove any unnecessary barriers to collaboration. Since CIRCIA is still in the rulemaking process until later this year, there's still time to ensure that regulatory effectiveness and harmonization are core features of our national cyber incident reporting requirements. The final rule must not place an undue burden on private sector entities that are critical to our national cyber defense. I want to thank our witnesses, Scott Aronson from Edison Electric, Heather Hogsett from Bank Policy Institute, Robert Mayer from U.S. Telecom, and Ari Schwartz from the Cyber Security Coalition for being here today. Most of you have testified before during our hearings last May and each provided invaluable insight to this subcommittee. Thank you for being here today. With President Trump in office, we have a unique opportunity to create a common-sense cyber regulatory structure that ensures compliance serves its purpose to share actionable information with the federal government and with each other. As nation-state threats rise, we must do all we can to ensure that our cyber professionals can focus their precious time and attention and resources on securing networks and critical infrastructure and not on checking a box. I look forward to working with you as we pursue this shared objective. I yield.
Chairman yields back. Other members of the committee are reminded that opening statements may be submitted for the record. I'm pleased to have a distinguished panel of witnesses before us today. I ask that our witnesses please rise and raise their right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you will give before the Committee on Homeland Security of the United States House of Representatives will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record reflect that all the witnesses have answered in the affirmative. Thank you. Please be seated. I would now like to formally introduce our witnesses. Mr. Scott Aronson currently serves as Senior Vice President for Energy Security Industry Operations for the Edison Electric Institute. In this role, he focuses on industry security and resilience initiatives, establishing collaborative partnerships between government and electric companies and across critical infrastructure sectors that enhance security for the energy sector. In addition to his role at EEI, Scott also serves as the Secretary for Electricity Subsector Coordinating Council, ESCC. Ms. Heather Hogsett is the Senior Vice President and the Deputy Head of BITS, the Technology Policy Division of the Bank Policy Institute. In this position, she develops and leads initiatives on emerging technology, security resilience matters facing the nation's largest financial firms. Ms. Hogsett also co-chairs the Policy Committee of the Financial Services Sector Coordinating Council and is a board member of FTLD Registry Services. Mr. Robert Mayer is the Senior Vice President of Cybersecurity Innovation with the U.S. Telecom Association. He is responsible for leading cyber and national security policy and strategic initiatives. In addition to this role, he serves as Chairman of the Communications Sector Coordinating Council, which represents the broadcast, cable, satellite, wireless, and wireline industries in connection with DHS and public-private partnership activities across the U.S. government. He also serves as co-chair of the Council to Secure Digital Economy. Ari Schwartz currently serves as the coordinator for the Cybersecurity Coalition. In this role, he leads a consortium of cybersecurity companies, coordinating the coalition's advocacy and education regarding cybersecurity policies. He also serves as the managing director of cybersecurity services for Venable, where he helps organizations develop and implement cybersecurity risk management strategies. He was previously a member of the White House National Security Council, where he served as Special Assistant to the President and Senior Director for Cybersecurity. Thank the witnesses for being here today. I now recognize Mr. Aronson for 5 minutes to summarize his opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Garbarino, and Ranking Member Swalwell, Chairman Green, and to all the members of the subcommittee. Appreciate the opportunity to testify today on cyber regulatory harmonization and specifically on implementation of the Cyber Incident Reporting for Critical Infrastructure Act of 2022, or more easily, CIRCIA. My name is Scott Aronson, and as noted, I'm Senior Vice President for Energy Security and Industry Operations at the Edison Electric Institute. As you know, EEI is the trade association representing 250 million companies that provide electricity to nearly 250 million Americans, operating in all 50 states and the District of Columbia. As I testified last May, EEI and its members wholly endorse the policy objectives underpinning CIRCIA. Incident reporting can help industry and our government partners identify threats, see patterns, set policies, and prioritize risks to better protect critical infrastructure. CIRCIA is an important law with an important goal of identifying and mitigating cyber risks across all sectors of the economy, and I appreciate this committee's leadership in shepherding this effort these last several years. When CIRCIA was enacted, Congress emphasized that the legislation sought to strike a balance between enabling CISA to receive information quickly and allowing the impacted entities to respond to an attack without imposing burdensome requirements that prioritize paperwork over cyber defense and response. Details matter when it comes to how CIRCIA or any new cybersecurity policy is implemented. Nearly a year after the subcommittee's hearing and my initial testimony on CIRCIA, we are in a period of transition with a new administration and a new Congress. Change brings opportunity, and I urge this subcommittee to leverage this opportunity to help ensure CISA is implementing CIRCIA effectively. Both my written testimony and comments today focus on two main considerations for Congress when evaluating how best to proceed. First, the need to finalize the CIRCIA rule as mandated by statute so that electric companies and all critical infrastructure operators can benefit from this reporting to mitigate attacks and the disruptions they can cause. And second, improving the existing proposal to better align with congressional intent. CISA must do more to meaningfully incorporate industry feedback into the final rule to ensure reporting is not duplicative and that government is resourced to ingest and protect this sensitive information. Following the hearing last May, EEI has continued to engage with CISA on CIRCIA. In July 2024, EEI submitted 3 sets of comments on the proposed rule. And in October 2024, EEI joined more than 20 organizations in requesting the establishment of an ex parte process to enhance stakeholder engagement and facilitate ongoing dialogue for implementation. As I once again testify before you alongside the financial services and telecommunications sectors, representing some of the most sophisticated critical infrastructure operators, our collective concern remains that even the most mature sectors will be overburdened by the proposed rule if it were to be finalized as is. The committee should work with CISA to reduce this burden and focus on a few areas for improvement. First, conduct oversight regarding the current status of CIRCIA, including staffing levels, resource needs, the projected timeline for final rule completion, and anticipated future engagement with industry stakeholders. Second, facilitate coordination amongst congressional committees of jurisdiction to align CISA, sector risk management agencies, and other regulators, and to review concerns with existing federal reporting requirements, including the national security concerns associated with the public disclosure of incidents as required by the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission rule. Third, further clarify CISA's role in cybersecurity regulatory harmonization in relation to other federal entities. And fourth, reauthorize the Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act of 2015. Mandatory incident reporting and voluntary information sharing both are valuable tools in ensuring the cybersecurity of critical infrastructure. EEI and its members are committed to working with both public and private partners across all sectors to comply with incident reporting requirements and cyber regulations more broadly in a way that prioritizes and enhances critical infrastructure security. We look forward to working with you and CISA to finalize a rule that leverages existing regimes, provides meaningful insights to government and industry, and protects sensitive information. I'll also take a moment here to note, a little off script, that the news this morning about the Critical Infrastructure Partnership Advisory Committee Act being rethought under this new leadership at the Department of Homeland Security. It's not our place to decide how government organizes, but I want to highlight the value of industry-government partnership. And CPAC provides extraordinary protections for those partnerships and those partnership activities. Nearly 90% of critical infrastructure is owned by the private sector. It's critical because it's critical to national security, and it is critical to the life and safety of the communities that we serve. Industry and government have to be working hand in glove, and again, CPAC provides a really valuable mechanism to do that. We appreciate the bipartisan support of this committee in ensuring we get CIRCIA right and CPAC right, and we look forward to continuing our collaboration to protect the safety, security, well-being of all Americans as we face evolving cyber risk. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Aronson. I now recognize Ms. Hogsett for 5 minutes to summarize her opening statement.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Garbarino, Ranking Member Swalwell, Chairman Green, and honorable members of the subcommittee. Thank you for inviting me to testify. I'm Heather Hogsett, Senior Vice President and Deputy Head of BITS, the Technology Division of the Bank Policy Institute. BPI is a nonpartisan policy, research, and advocacy organization representing the nation's leading banks. On behalf of BPI members, we greatly appreciate this committee's leadership and the opportunity to provide perspective on cybersecurity regulations. As today's national security threats increasingly target vital infrastructure and our economy, it is imperative that industry and government work together to have an awareness of cyber incidents and vulnerabilities, while ensuring cyber teams can focus on day-to-day tasks, responding to incidents when they occur, and implementing next-generation technologies. Unfortunately, the current state of cyber regulations detract from this vital work. To support the nation's security and resilience, we offer a few recommendations. First, streamline the reporting of cyber incidents to allow cyber teams to focus on response. I previously testified before this committee in support of the Cyber Incident Reporting for Critical Infrastructure Act, CIRCIA, and its goal to create a uniform incident reporting system. This would provide CISA with information it needs to have broader awareness of cyber threats and the tactics used by attackers. Armed with this information, CISA can better assess threats and provide early warning to help other entities protect themselves. We continue to believe that CIRCIA, if properly implemented, will play an important role in our collective defense. However, as we noted in formal comments last June, it is critical that the final rule not extend beyond the authorities granted to it under the statute. Bipartisan members of this committee, as well as Senator Peters, submitted comments emphasizing a similar view. Your comments were enormously helpful in reiterating congressional intent, and we thank you for your continued leadership and engagement. We, along with several other financial trade associations, recently asked that the current proposal be withdrawn and reissued. In particular, we encouraged CISA to significantly revise last year's proposed rule to reduce the scope of reporting to incidents affecting critical services, focus data collection on what companies need to know to prevent contagion, and reduce ongoing reporting obligations. At the same time, Congress and the administration should direct other agencies to cease issuance of bespoke reporting requirements. Some agencies, such as the federal banking regulators, have incident notification requirements that are simple and serve a very specific operational or emergency response purpose. These requirements were developed in close collaboration with industry and work well in practice. Other agencies, however, continue to issue onerous reporting or disclosure requirements with different definitions, timelines, and varying data elements that do not improve security outcomes. One rule in particular is the SEC's requirement to disclose material cyber incidents within 4 business days, regardless of whether the incident has been contained or remediated. This rule should be rescinded as it undermines CIRCIA and confidential reporting and unnecessarily complicates incident response. Second, we encourage Congress and the administration to consolidate industry-specific cyber regulations and regulatory oversight. This is a particularly acute challenge for financial institutions with multiple regulators. A survey of bank chief information security officers found that they spend 30 to 50% of their time on compliance and examiner management, and their teams can spend 70% of their time on those functions. Firms receive on average 100 requests for information leading up to an exam, with anywhere from 75 to 100 supplemental requests during an exam that can take weeks, if not months, to complete. Once one exam is completed, another regulator often comes in to examine the same or a similar topic. The current state risks undermining our security, and it is time for a reassessment. Finally, we urge Congress to reauthorize cyber information sharing protections that expire this fall. The Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act of 2015 established important liability and antitrust protections for entities sharing cyber threat information, which were subsequently incorporated into CIRCIA. In the decades since their enactment, these protections have supported not only the sharing of cyber threat indicators, but also broader awareness of vulnerabilities, knowledge of threat actors and their tactics, and effective defensive measures. Recent attacks against public and private infrastructure underscore the importance of preserving these protections and the important information exchange they facilitate. We greatly appreciate this committee's thoughtful approach to these issues and stand ready to work with you to protect the security and resilience of our nation's infrastructure. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Hogsett. I now recognize Mr. Mayor for 5 minutes to summarize his opening statement.
Chairman Garbarino, Ranking Member Swalwell, Chairman Green, and our honorable members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today on the critical issues of cybersecurity incident reporting and regulatory harmonization. We are committed to strengthening the public-private partnership to bolster our national security and stay ahead of our adversaries. This committee has an extraordinary opportunity to reset our national cybersecurity policies in ways that directly impact security outcomes. Our nation is under constant cyber attack, with estimates of up to $23 trillion in annual damages by 2027, increasing at a rate of more than 20% per year. We must take immediate action to eliminate redundant or conflicting cyber regulations, which can consume up to 70% of cybersecurity resources. By streamlining these requirements, we can free up critical resources for threat mitigation and incident response at virtually no cost. Let me reaffirm our view that it is essential we fix how the Cyber Incident Reporting for Critical Infrastructure Act, CIRCIA, needs to be implemented. While well-intentioned, it is essential that we refine its execution to ensure consistency with the law's original intent. Specifically, key terms such as covered incident, covered entity, and reasonable belief must be clearly defined. The liability protections designed to safeguard cyber attack victims and promote candid reporting must be strengthened. As of today, none of these fundamental issues have been meaningfully addressed in a manner visible to industry, nor has our sector been substantively engaged in addressing these concerns. We urgently need an ex parte process, which is to say, a formal, transparent, and common process that encourages CISA to hear and consider industry perspectives. In fact, U.S. Telecom spearheaded a letter of 21 organizations that formally requested that CISA establish such a process, a request that was rejected. Had this request been granted immediately, we would have already been working together to resolve these challenges. If we do not act quickly, we will end up with a rule that does more harm than good. We must also recognize that this law does not exist in isolation. The patchwork of federal, state, sector-specific cyber incident reporting requirements presents an ever-growing burden on organizations attempting to comply with multiple, often conflicting mandates. Fortunately, there is strong lawmaker interest to harmonize cyber regulations, including incident reporting requirements. We believe that the Office of the National Cyber Director should play a leading role in rationalizing cybersecurity regulations and incident reporting regimes. Solving the problem of fragmented state laws will require clear federal preemption, complemented by robust safe harbor provisions. This work must be prioritized as it directly tied to our national security. We believe it is important that Congress acts now. We do not have time for further studies, requests for information, commissions, or pilot programs. Every moment spent delaying reform provides adversaries with additional opportunities to undermine our collective security. We must move swiftly and decisively to enhance our cybersecurity posture. Major recent cybersecurity incidents have highlighted the importance of a stronger and more coordinated information sharing and incident response partnership between the federal government and the private sector. Congress advanced that project with the Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act of 2015, which is set to sunset in September of 2025. We ask that Congress extend the act and establish additional policies to improve the public-private partnership. We must also be willing to reconsider policies that have failed to produce meaningful security benefits. One such example is the Security and Exchange Commission cyber disclosure requirements, which rather than enhancing security have inadvertently provided malicious actors with a roadmap to exploit vulnerabilities. These mandates must be reassessed to prevent them from serving as a tool for cyber criminals. In conclusion, success in cybersecurity requires close collaboration between the industry and government, including Congress and the Office of National Cyber Director. We must act now to ensure that our cybersecurity policies are well-reasoned, well-informed, and designed to maximize efficiency and effectiveness. By fixing CERCIA's implementation, harmonizing cyber regulations, and eliminating unnecessary burdens, we can strengthen our nation's cybersecurity defenses and uphold our commitment to protecting national security. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I now recognize Mr. Schwartz for 5 minutes to summarize his opening statement.
Chairman Garbarino, Ranking Member Swalwell, Chairman Green, members of the subcommittee, thank you for having me here to appear before you today. It's an honor to discuss the widely shared goals of harmonizing cybersecurity regulations. My name is Ari Schwartz. I am coordinator of the Cybersecurity Coalition, the leading policy coalition representing companies that develop cybersecurity products and services. As cybersecurity threats continue to grow, calls for cybersecurity regulation around the world have increased as well. In the US, choices that Congress made 10 to 15 years ago led most cybersecurity regulations to be overseen by the current sectoral regulators. This has the convenience of maintaining the current relationship between the regulated company and the regulator. Organizations are overseen by agencies that know that sector. But each agency is not going to have full expertise in cybersecurity. New cross-sector and international regulations have continued to grow, making harmonization difficult, but it's not impossible. Agencies must work extra hard to ensure that regulations can align so we're not overburdening organizations and putting so much work on compliance that we are draining resources that otherwise could go to actually improving security. The example where this is most obvious today is around incident reporting. Incident reporting allows agencies to track what's happening in and across sectors and, in the best case scenario, alert potential victims before it's too late. However, as DHS pointed out in a report to Congress in 2023, 45 different incident reporting requirements have been created, led by 23 different agencies. Internationally, the reporting regimes have grown equally large. These reports are on different time frames, use different types of information, and use different taxonomies to describe the information. This has led to duplication, misalignment, and general confusion. In 2022, Congress passed CERCIA, a law intended to have critical infrastructure standardize reporting and send it to CISA. CISA ran a process to receive comments on how this reporting should work and issued a notice of proposed rulemaking in 2024. It is the Cybersecurity Coalition's view that the proposed rule did not meet Congress's goal of adequately harmonizing incident reporting requirements. First of all, there was a lack of engagement. While CISA clearly tried to follow the letter of the law in getting comments on the rulemaking, it failed to adequately engage the sectors. The open sessions that were held were rote and did not address known concerns of the community. The CISA representatives simply repeated the same questions CISA had originally posed. Secondly, there's an overbroad scope in the proposed rule. Instead of harmonizing around existing rules or best practices identified by the sectors, CISA decided to create a new broad definition of covered entities. CISA also decided to create a new construct of what triggers reporting and what needs to be reported. Lastly, there's a failure to streamline the reporting. While CISA made some attempts to ensure that the report filed with CISA would be shared with others that might require it, the proposed rule did not go far enough to demonstrate that CISA was attempting to solve the problem of duplicative reporting, seemingly placing the onus on the reporting on the organizations. We believe that these issues can be addressed if CISA makes a commitment to meeting with the sectors. We suggest this be done through an ex-parte rulemaking process using the critical infrastructure partnership known as CPAC. However, we have heard that Secretary Noem last week shut down the CPAC, which we think is a mistake for many reasons, with this process being a good example where the CPAC process can play a critical role in the public-private partnership. Finally, while we were talking about the importance of sharing information with the government, I would be remiss not to speak up in favor of reauthorization of the Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act of 2015. This law has provided the ability for companies to share cyber threat information among themselves and with government. It has streamlined the definition of what cyber threat information and has allowed multiple groups to form and to share that information, to quickly stop in order to respond to incidents. We hope that reauthorization of the law is a priority for this subcommittee. I thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartz. Members will be recognized by order of seniority for their 5 minutes of questioning. I want to remind everyone to please keep their questioning to 5 minutes. An additional round of questioning may be called after all members have been recognized. I now recognize the gentleman from Tennessee, the chairman of the committee, Mr. Green, for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you. First, let me say the testimony today has been superb. My questions will be to reiterate points you've made. In fact, I just told my senior staffer for cybersecurity to get copies of everyone's testimony and provide it at the Cyber Subs meeting. The Cyber Subs Committee, I started this last year. Some of you may be aware of this, where we meet all the cyber subcommittees to try to get a whole of government approach here. We're going to send copies of your testimony to every cyber subcommittee member in this Congress. This was excellent. Thank you. Congress has a duty. Let me make this point. Congress has a duty that we have shirked over 40 years in both parties and passed off to the bureaucracy. The Constitution is really clear. A lot of these things that the administration is now closing, Chevron deference, and the Supreme Court have ruled it really belonged to Congress in the first place, and we never should have passed it off to the doggone administration and the bureaucracy, right? And so I get that there's some frustration that certain things are being closed, but I mean, constitutionally, we need to do that here. It's a part of our oversight obligation. It's a part of our particularly reporting and review boards and things like that. I was told yesterday, and I don't know if it's completely true, I got to fact check this, but the VA spends $1 billion on compliance. Does that seem reasonable? $1 billion on compliance? These conflicting rules in this, all this time, I think, Ms. Hogsett, you said 30% on actual just checking the box compliance and 70% on real cybersecurity. Was that the ratio you quoted?
30 to 50% of the Chief Information Security Officer's time is spent on that, and 70% of their teams.
Ridiculous. Let me ask this question. What is the average time to close a vulnerability when one's been identified? And give me a number of days and I'm going to run the average vulnerability. Closing the door takes how long? Take a guess.
You're going to hate this answer. It depends.
Great.
True. If it's a critical vulnerability, firms work to close that within days, if possible. It all depends on whether
More
you're
than
reliant.
4?
It would depend on how much control you have over it. If it's something that resides within a third party, you have less control and ability to move quickly to close it.
Yeah, I don't want to speculate, sir, on an average, but I will tell you that if you look at the recent attacks that are coming from nation states, it's taken weeks, months, and it's still a process that's underway.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure we've patched the telecom breach yet.
Yeah, so if we're talking about like browsers, they can close them in hours, but if you're talking about operational technology, it takes days.
Days.
Yeah.
Yeah, and SEC pulls the number 4 days out of their backside and thinks that they're doing shareholders a positive. But when they announce that they've got a hole in the door or in the wall and it's not going to be closed, it invites attack from everybody. It's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. Let me ask this question. We've got to go and figure out all this list of duplicity, list of conflicting. How best do we as Congress, does this subcommittee and the subcommittees across our Congress figure out all the list of duplicative requirements and contradictory requirements? How do we go get this information?
So first of all, I appreciate what you said about the coordination across all the committees of jurisdiction. I think understanding, the first thing a cyber CISO or a CSO is going to do is inventory their entire system to understand where vulnerabilities might be. I'd say that Congress needs to inventory the system, understand where all of the regulatory requirements are so that we can start to do the hard work of harmonizing. And just to foot stomp something that you said about the lunacy of the SEC rule, adversaries, and to talk about the vulnerabilities and the time to patch, adversaries watch our response. And I understand, the importance of sunshine and transparency, but we also have to understand that intelligent adversaries are leveraging our transparency when perpetrating attacks and seeing how we respond.
Don't we list the identified vulnerabilities somewhere in a database that the bad guys can sit there and take a look at and then challenge and find where that vulnerability is anywhere in the system?
Those vulnerabilities become a little less important when everybody knows about them. So there is that.
There's always that legacy system that's still running the old thing that nobody catches, and it's an open door. That's what worries me there, Mr. Schwartz.
I was going to say, I mean, you shouldn't post, this is one of the reasons we say, we need a patch before you post a vulnerability.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
patch has to exist, but then people actually have to patch.
We just got to get everybody to download the patch. Thank you, I yield.
Thank you to our chairman. Now I recognize the gentlewoman from New York, the former chair, Ms. Clark.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I thank Ranking Member Swalwell for letting me waive on to today's subcommittee hearing. And thank you to our panelists of witnesses for excuse me, joining us today. Before I begin my formal comments, I'd like to associate myself with the sentiments of Ranking Member Swalwell regarding Congressman Sylvester Turner. We are grateful for his service to the people of Houston, Texas, and to his family and loved ones. We extend our deepest condolences. May he rest in peace. When I introduced CERCIA back in 2021 with Ranking Member Thompson and Chairman Garbarino, I did so because I recognized the important need for increased visibility into the cyber incidents affecting critical infrastructure and the importance of a central hub for cyber incident reporting in the federal enterprise. I worked with many of the witnesses here today to get CERCIA across the finish line, and I appreciate their ongoing efforts to make sure that we get the final rule right. I also appreciate Mr. Swalwell's work encouraging CISA to effectively engage with the private sector on the rule. I agree with my colleagues and the witnesses before us that there are necessary improvements to the proposed rule, but the urgency of implementing CERCIA remains. And I hope the new administration will work quickly to modify the proposed rule and publish a final one without undue delay. I have two questions for our witnesses. First of all, to all of our witnesses, without a well-defined cyber incident reporting rule and harmonization process for CISA, we run the risk of agencies across government issuing a hodgepodge of duplicative cyber incident reporting requirements. How will scrambling to comply with multiple incident reporting requirements affect security? And then secondly, many stakeholders have weighed in that the proposed CERCIA rule defined covered entities and covered incidents too broadly, unnecessarily increasing the burden on the private sector and potentially overwhelming CISA with too many reports to analyze. Indeed, CERCIA instructed CISA to identify subsets of entities and incidents subject to reporting requirements to avoid that outcome. And you give me your thoughts on that. We'll start with Mr. Aronson and then work our way across.
So on the first question, we'll just echo some of the things that Ms. Hogsett said about the time that information security teams are spending on compliance. It's somewhere between 30 and 50%, and as you expand the hodgepodge, to use your word, of reporting requirements, it only gets more complicated. To your point about the broadness of CERCIA as it currently exists and the uncertainty that surrounds it, taken at its most sort of broad interpretation of what is a covered entity and what is a covered incident, we had one of our companies report that they thought they would have as many as 65,000 reports between 2022 and 2033. I think the number that CISA had said would be somewhere in the 200 to 220,000 total in that time frame. So it seems to be off by, if that's just one company taking at a really broad interpretation, seems to be off by an order of magnitude. This goes to the importance of getting the definitions and the details right so that we can get some signal from the noise and so that CISA can ingest the information in a meaningful way.
Very well, Ms. Hogsett.
Sure, just to add to that, and thank you for the question. The challenge of responding to multiple requirements does have a direct impact on security because it is diverting the time and attention away from what we all want the cyber professionals to be doing, which is defending their networks, kicking out bad actors when there is an incident and focusing on that, Instead, they have to divert time away to basically make sure they're complying with different legal obligations. With respect to the definitions and covered entities within CERCIA and the proposed rule, this committee was very thoughtful, and Scott just alluded to it, to make sure that the law would be crafted in a way that we get signal from the noise. You wanted the incidents that were going to be most impactful so that CISA could very quickly have the capability to take that information and turn it back around to share with other entities that could also be at risk. The very broad scope with which the proposed rule was put together would put a lot of noise out there and make that all the more challenging. For instance, the definition would potentially capture operational outages that have nothing to do with a cyber incident, and I don't think that that was really what you and the committee had intended in crafting that law.
Very well, Mr. Meyer, my time's up.
Yes, thank you. Congresswoman Clark, I think that we have to deal with the fact that the reporting requirements right now are extraordinarily fragmented. And the CERC itself, Cyber Incident Reporting Council, at the time in September 23, identified 45 different reporting regimes, 22 agencies, I believe. I can only imagine that the number has increased since then. CISA has indicated that they expect 300,000 entities to be responding to these kind of requests. I can only imagine in the absence of clear definitions around the terms that you folks identified and staying close to the intent, in the absence of revising that and refining that and making it operationally practical for companies to respond, the system will get overwhelmed. The system in government will get overwhelmed, and the system in the operating environment will also get overwhelmed. The critical point here is that during a major cyber incident, when we are essentially in a triage mode, we can't take people and divert them from their frontline responsibilities to detect the problem, remediate it, and respond and recover. So we believe that this particular rule needs to be reconstructed to align with your intentions. And if it doesn't, we're going to be doing more. As I indicated, it'll create more harm than good.
Very well.
I agree with everyone on the panel has said on the answer to the first question. On the second question, I'll just briefly say that on the idea of the definition of covered entities, CISA decided to kind of try to narrow the scope by the size of the company, by going to the size of the companies, which I think does help in terms of removing some of the small, medium-sized businesses that we might not want to report, but it doesn't get to the risk issue, right? So you're going to have a lot of large very large companies that have a lot of incidents, echoing what we heard from others here, that are going to be reporting a lot that is not of the same value as if we did it based on some kind of risk feature.
Very well. Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. I now recognize the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Higgins, for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate this hearing today, and I concur with Chairman Green. It's been excellent testimony, and I appreciate it. I'm going to review it very carefully. Mr. Chairman, in the 118th Congress, the last Congress, I introduced a bill, H.R. 10123, the Streamlining Federal Cybersecurity Regulations Act, which essentially cut down on duplicated or misaligned regulatory requirements and authorities on the cybersecurity industry. I'll be reintroducing that bill shortly in the 119th Congress, and I look forward to my colleagues' support on both sides of the aisle with that bill. Because, Mr. Aronson, how many federal agencies, how many federal cyber regulations is a typical energy company required to report to in a given year? Just roughly.
I mean, I'll just give you the agencies that we definitely have reporting requirements.
That list would be too long to enumerate, but you're talking about, just tell America, 2, 4, 10, a dozen?
More than a dozen.
More than a dozen. The gentleman said more than a dozen cyber regulators require a report from the energy industry. Ms. Hogg said, how many federal agencies does a bank need to file with to remain in good cybersecurity standing?
We're similar, and that's only at the federal level. You also have states and international requirements to adhere to.
So at the federal level, which we control, would you concur with Mr. Aronson, somewhere north of 10 or a dozen?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, similar question. How many federal agencies does the telecommunications industry have to report to?
I would agree with the number of over a dozen.
Easily over a dozen.
Easily
Mr.
over-
Schwartz, you have a comment there?
For IT, I would say that it's
It's a lot, right?
in the same range, but it's spread out because it's people
Okay.
we're reporting to the different sectors.
So now that we've clarified that for America, the objective here for the United States Congress is to reduce that mess so that the cybersecurity industry can actually perform its primary mission, which is to protect the nation and the industries of the nation from cyber attack, which we become increasingly susceptible to as technologies emerge. And while our cybersecurity industry is busy checking boxes that the federal government and bureaucracies has imposed upon the industry, they have that much less time to spend on that actual mission of protecting the nation, the citizenry, and the industries of America. So how many of these agencies that require a report, we've agreed is over a dozen, how many of them have streamlined themselves, like coordinated with each other, and said, let's eliminate this and this and this, and combine it into one? Has that ever happened, Mr. Aronson?
The Department of Energy has been fairly thoughtful because it's our sector risk management agency and it's non-regulatory. That has actually helped them
So within themselves, they've done some streamlining.
to help.
Across the departments and agencies, have you seen a similar effort just organically?
No, certainly not.
Thank
I think
you.
it's, your oversight has helped.
Ms. Hogshead, has there been any organic effort from the bureaucracies to streamline and reduce themselves?
Yes and no. The yes is when it comes to incident notification, we have good coordination across 3 of our primary banking regulators. They aligned, there's a single standard, single definition, and you provide information to one.
They look for
Done.
common definitions?
Yes.
This is a good sign.
It is. However,
within the banking industry, but
it is.
there's a however here.
that is with respect to incident reporting specifically.
For an incident report.
Broader cybersecurity, we have even overlap and duplication among them.
Roger that. Mr. Mayor?
Same story. I'm not aware of any major or significant.
Thank you. Me either. It was good to hear about the banking industry, but that's per incident reports. That's different. That's not total regulatory authority being streamlined. Mr. Schwartz?
No, there's just been work
Okay.
gathered.
So, Mr. Chairman, this is why Congress must act to bring clarity to the regulatory authority, and I will hand you for your review, Mr. Chairman, the bill from last year. I intend to introduce it in the 119th in a slightly refined iteration, and I would appreciate your support. Mr. Aronson, you had mentioned, we haven't had time for this question. You said that adversaries watch our response. Is it possible at all for the cybersecurity industry to strike back? If you said that adversaries are watching you, you must be able to identify the bad actor. Can you strike back at all against a bad actor?
The private sector, well, I don't want to speak for the whole
Private sector.
Electric companies do not want to be in offensive cyber engagements. That is
Well,
the purview of the
we're gonna probably give you that opportunity. Mr. Chairman, my time has expired. We'll have questions to submit in writing to each of these witnesses, and I appreciate this hearing, sir.
Gentlemen in the back, we probably will have a second round of questions if you have time, but we will take them in writing as well.
They have to be in writing.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. I now recognize the ranking member, gentleman from California, Mrs. Swalwell, for 5 minutes of questions.
Mr. Schwartz, how should CISA revise its comment process to better engage stakeholders, and how would you recommend CISA structure additional feedback opportunities to maximize stakeholder input without unduly delaying issuing a final rule?
Yeah, CISA has the tools today to do this, and Congress gave them the tools to engage with the private sector in a way that they can get direct advice on issues and do it under protected from FACA, protected from Freedom of Information Act, so that companies can feel free to share and that it only goes into the process of writing this rule. And they should use that to define their ex parte process. It is the CPAC authority that provides them to do that, and that's exactly what we recommend that they do.
To each witness, and feel free to jump in.
I'll start.
A decade ago, actually, sorry, a new question for each witness. Congress passed the Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act of 2015, which facilitates the voluntary sharing of cybersecurity information between the private sector and the government. It expires, as I noted in my opening remarks, in September. What are the consequences of CISA expiring? Ms. Hawks.
I'll start. So the CISA 2015 protections really form the foundation for how we collaborate, not just with government, but also across industry to ensure that we are sharing necessary information to protect everybody. So it's a key foundation for our collective defense. It provides information sharing protections, liability protections, antitrust protections, and we've now had the benefit of that for the last 10 years, and I think over that time, we've certainly seen an increase in collaboration. I think our sector has always collaborated well within itself, but the expansion to across sectors and with other companies has been very valuable. We would hate to see that disappear and that we walk back some of the gains that we've made in that space. And also, as we noted earlier, CIRCIA itself, with respect to incident reporting, refers back to the CISA 2015 protections. Right. So as we're getting ready to share more sensitive information, more detailed information to the government, we do want to make sure that it is well protected.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So at a minimum, we think it's absolutely essential that the CISA 2015 Act be reauthorized. As pointed out, I think we've learned things in the last 10 years, what has encouraged additional information sharing, what has constrained it. So there are opportunities to make enhancements, improvements in the law. The cost of not doing this is monumental. It'll cause companies to be very careful about what they submit, reluctant to submit with the protections that Heather alluded to, and we'll be undermining our national security if we don't have something in place to either continue it in its current form, but ideally to reflect what we've learned over the past decade.
Yeah, Mr. Schwartz.
Yeah, so we've seen information sharing organizations grow around this law, and that they are specifically created. The Cyber Threat Alliance, for example, is specifically built around this law. That the way that the financial sector, ISAC, shares out with other groups, not internal, but with other organizations, is built around the pieces of this law. If this law disappears, they will have to redo how they are structured. So we will lose critical time just doing that.
I'm okay. I would just say this. I'm okay with I believe in the principles of sunk cost, and just because you've been doing it doesn't mean that's the best way to do it. Is it beneficial?
But it will definitely slow and in some cases totally stop information sharing that has prevented threats.
Got it.
And prevented incidents from happening.
Great. Thanks.
So I want to spike in here. I agree with everything that my fellow panelists have said, so I'll just associate myself with that. Those protections, I sort of think of it north-south, industry and government sharing information, east-west across critical sectors, has really grown up because of those protections in CISA. I also want to respond a little bit to something that Mr. Higgins was saying. Incident reporting and information sharing are both incredibly valuable, but understanding what the difference between those two things is. Information sharing is about ongoing threats where we don't have full certainty of what an adversary might be doing, and sharing tactics, techniques, and procedures across critical sectors so we can all collectively defend is incredibly valuable. Incident reporting has value too. Once we know what that risk was, helping to identify those patterns, helping to socialize those broadly, helping government to set priorities, helping to set policy that is informed by what is actually happening in cyberspace is incredibly valuable. So we like incident reporting, we like information sharing. It just needs to be done with protections and in an effective way that, again, government can ingest all of this and not put undue burden on the people who are just trying to defend networks.
Great. Appreciate that, and yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Jimenez, for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And today I had actually a meeting with the airline industry, and then we talked about this issue, and we asked about, okay, when they have an incident, how many different reporting requirements they have? They have at least 10 different agencies that they have to report the same incident to, which seems a little bit inefficient, all right? And so And I, the Representative Higgins asked the same question. You were saying it's 10, 12, et cetera. Would it make sense to have one form sent to one place and then that one place disseminate that information?
Can I start? It would absolutely make sense. It's critical.
No, we're not going to do it then.
sorry?
Okay, thanks. Yeah, you're asking us to do the impossible. Moving on. How many reportable incidents do you think there are? I guess you would know in your particular case, but across the United States, how many reportable incidents do you think there are per day? Per day, yeah.
What definition are you using and what's
I mean,
the threshold?
something that requires a report, or something that requires an industry to write a report. How many of those incidents occur per day here in the United States? Anybody have any idea?
I would take a guess here. I think over 1,000 incidents could be reported daily.
Over 1,000?
Over 1,000, collectively across the entire, our sector,
Just your sector?
just my sector.
Just sector. How about banking?
I struggle to answer that because of the threshold. You have incidents or events that might occur constantly, but they don't necessarily rise.
No, I'm
to the
saying
level that we
reportable. I'm
think is-
saying reportable. You have to report.
We have notification requirements that are private, so I wouldn't even know, and a firm wouldn't be able to tell me because they're not allowed to.
Can you give me a guess?
I would have to get back to you to have an informed response on that.
Okay, how about an uninformed response? Just give me a swag, okay?
Honestly, I hesitate.
Okay,
to
what
say.
about, and energy?
So, to something Ms. Hogshead saying, there are wildly different reporting requirements. There's some that, pretty low bar, there's some that have extremely high bar. I can go back to the statistic that I know from one company that did a relatively deep dive on its reporting requirements, especially with pursuant to CERCIA's broadest definitions, and that was going to be 65,000 over 10 years. So that's one company, 65,000 incidents over 10 years, 6,500 a year, that's 500 a month.
Just one company?
That's just one company.
Just one company.
So
How many
call it-
companies do you have?
EEI represents 62 investor-owned electric companies.
62?
That's right.
So could I assume 62 times 500
Sure,
per day?
sure.
Or is that a month?
Well,
Is that a month?
that's one of our larger companies, and that was 500 a month. So maybe it might be easy to get to several thousand a
Okay.
month.
Okay, several thousand a month? Okay. Does anybody know how this data is analyzed? No, nobody knows how it's analyzed. So we require you to send a bunch of stuff, but you guys don't know how it's analyzed by wherever it is we send it to. Okay. I'll bet you it's not because of the overwhelming volume, all right? And so we need to look at that, Mr. Chairman, okay? If you're requiring you to do something and then we don't use the data for anything, then it's actually worse, all right? Because you're making them do stuff that nobody looks at. So we need to bring some other folks and say, how do you analyze all the data that you're getting that you require from everybody else to see that actually we're doing any good? Mr. Aronson, you talked about, we asked about offensive capability. You don't have offensive capability. You don't want to use offensive capability.
So that's a pretty thorny topic. I'll go.
No, I just want to ask, would you like to use offensive capability?
No, the private sector would not like to, the electric companies would not like to get into.
You just want to get punched
cyber-
over and over again? Just get punched once and
Well,
punched
this is
again,
where
and punched again,
government
and
comes
punched
in.
again?
So there are two ways you deter, right? Deterring, the attack does not have the intended consequence. That's on the private sector to protect its systems in a way that we can withstand a lot of punches. The other way you deter is an attack has a consequence, and we would believe that that is fully the purview of our intelligence and national security apparatus.
But we don't have the resources to do that all the time. But so we would, what if we charge or allow the private sector with all their resources, et cetera, to allow to counterpunch? You wouldn't want that?
So depends how you define counterpunch. I don't want to speak for the banks, but this notion of inking the money bag, that could be construed as
My time is up, and hopefully we'll have another round because I really want to get into that one. Okay, thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. We will have another round. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questions. Thank you all for being here today. Back again, I guess. In my submitted comment to former CISA Director Easterly on the CIRCIA notice of proposed rulemaking, I highlighted that Congress did not intend for CISA to subject numerous entities to its reporting requirements. Rather, Congress intended for CIRCIA to facilitate rapid information sharing, and that's not being achieved. So we're all here talking about it, and what should happen with the future CIRCIA. Ms. Hogg said you said BPI you sent a letter saying withdraw and reissue the rule. Ms. Aronson, Mr. Mayor, you both said ex parte could be a way to do it. Schwartz, I'm sorry, I had to leave in the middle of your testimony, so I don't know what position you took. What was?
I'm a ex parte, yeah.
Ex parte. So do you believe, Ms. Hogg said, do you believe an ex parte could work? I understand. We have a timing issue, which is the problem under the law. There's a timing issue, and I'm not sure we can meet the timing that the law requires if we fully withdraw and reissue. Can an ex parte fix the issues that you're?
We would very much support an ex parte process. We asked for further engagement and never got it, frankly, through the process thus far. We believe that rule as proposed should not be implemented, and we would rather take additional time, and we are prepared to work with CISA and would like an iterative dialogue to make sure that we get this right. It's too important, and we stand ready. We want to see this be successful. So I think the stakeholder engagement, given the complexities of the issue here, we do need that. That rule as proposed, please do not implement that.
Mr. Chairman, I think that this committee can be very helpful in urging CISA to grant our request for ex parte starting tomorrow. If we can work with the agency and provide our expertise and information about how we operationalize incident reporting, that can be integrated into their rules in the fall. But if we don't have that possibility to engage with them, which they clearly rejected, time and time again we've made the request, I think this is going to go down a path that's going to be very problematic for CISA and extraordinarily burdensome and costly for our sector.
As you said in your testimony, this will be more harm than good here.
Yes.
Listen, I agree with all of you that this rule should not be implemented as currently presented. And if it was, I would lead the effort to CRA it. But it's good to hear that you all think an ex parte could work, because I want this to work. I know the ranking member and the former chair Clark all want this rule to work. This is a big focus of mine, a big focus of now Chairman Green's. I'm happy he was here today. Harmonization, making sure incident and information sharing happens in the correct way. So I want this rule to work, and I will be, following this hearing, I'll work with committee staff on both sides to make sure that we reach out to CISA. I know they just nominated a new potential director this morning. I'm excited to see. No, not you. But Mr. Planky, I think could do a very good job. I've met with him. Director Easley had very nice things to say about him. So I think they may be willing to relook at this and move into an ex parte. One of you mentioned something, and I want to go with this because we talk about harmonization and how agencies don't listen to you all. And one of you brought up the SEC rule, maybe all of you brought up the SEC rule, which I've been fighting, and we passed the CRA out of committee, but because the Senate moves so slow, our time clock ran out over there. And I know the ranking member was also against the rule. One of you brought up the national security concerns. ONCD, I think, has national security concerns with that rule in your testimony. Can you speak to those, please?
I think
it might have been all of you that talked about it.
It may have been me who brought that up. So it's a perfect example of rules that don't add to security and, in fact, create vulnerabilities, as I mentioned. The bad guys, the cyber criminals, enterprises can manipulate the process of disclosure in ways that certainly were not intended and would not be helpful. So from a national security perspective, that particular rule, I'm not sure does anything to enhance our national security.
I would actually say it probably harms our national security. I think this is the challenge that we've kind of talked a bit about now here, is you have independent agencies that are doing something within their narrow lane. And so for the SEC, they think that investors need to know this information. I think we would argue that investors aren't really utilizing this information. It's not helpful to them. It's actually putting them at greater risk. But because an agency continues to look without somebody at the top sitting across and exercising oversight to say, does this really make sense? Is it in the best interest of the nation? We wind up with a lot of these duplicative, overlapping, deeply harmful rules. So to the extent that Congress and this committee is ready to engage and help lead this effort, we do need an overall view to look at what is helpful versus what is harmful, and the SEC rule is classic of what is harmful at this point.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And when I had Chairman Gensler in front of Financial Services, I asked him which was more important, investor knowledge or national, if investor information was more important than national security. He said no. So I think now it's time for the new SEC to look at this rule and correct it, because I've been told by people at CISA and industry that they've had to stop sharing information before, timely information, in order to comply with the SEC rule, and that is not good for anybody. I believe everybody who's been here for the first round is done, so we're going to start a second round of questions, and I recognize the ranking member from California, Mr. Swalwell, for his second round.
Great. I appreciate that, Chairman. Last week, the Secretary of Homeland Security disbanded more advisory committees at the department, including CPAC, the Critical Infrastructure Partnership Advisory Committee. For over 15 years, CPAC has played a significant role in the implementation of the National Infrastructure Protection Plan and has facilitated coordination of critical infrastructure protection and resilience activities across all levels of government and in partnership with the private sector. How will the termination of CPAC affect the coordination of critical infrastructure protection activities? And I'll just go across the witness table. Mr. Aronson.
Thank you, Ranking Member Swalwell. So the answer is it will depend on what it ultimately is replaced with. I understand every new administration gets the privilege of populating advisory committees. CPAC is not an advisory committee. It is an authority that the Secretary of Department of Homeland Security has to facilitate public-private partnership. And to all the discussion we had about offensive versus defensive capabilities and resilience and the fact that industry and government, again, 90%, as I mentioned in my opening comments, 90%, give or take, of critical infrastructure is owned by the private sector. This is a team sport, and CPAC is the rule book for how those teams, industry and government, can work collaboratively with protections, with the ability to have ongoing dialogues, with sector coordinating councils that facilitate information sharing to prepare for and respond to all of these hazards. And I will say the Electricity Subsector Coordinating Council has been a CEO-led body since after Superstorm Sandy in 2012. This isn't just about cyber. This is about storms and physical threats and all of the things that can impact critical infrastructure, which impact our ability to provide services to customers and communities across the United States and be prepared for all of these risks. CPAC or something like it is vital to our ability to use that partnership effectively.
Does anyone have an answer different than that they want to add? Just for the sake of the...
I'll just add that CPAC's different. I strongly agree with Chairman Green's comments. There are too many advisory committees, and DHS had too many advisory committees. Getting rid of some of them made sense. As Mr. Aronson said, this is not an advisory committee, right? It has the word advisory council, but it's not an advisory committee. The sectors organize themselves, right, and have their own bodies that then meet with the government, and that comes with the protections that can happen in a way that provides for open discussions. Sure. And we get more information from the government because it exists. And it is a good two-way conversation. It's been successful. All the nice things you've said about JCDC earlier, I agree with those. Yeah. This is the policy equivalent of that, and it goes back even further. And it's in some ways, we could talk about more success stories from it.
Sure.
So that's all that I'll add.
Let me, Mr. Aronson, I want to go back to something that Mr. Jimenez brought up, because I've thought about this for many years, and I have a congressional district that has a lot of tech and biotech companies, large and small, headquartered there, and they get hit all the time. I have Cowbell Cyber headquartered there. They do cyber insurance. And it's long frustrated me knowing the limited resources that we have at Cyber Command and at the Bureau and at the NSA and CIA. And I get the hesitancy for a business, even a large energy company, to go on offense. I'm imagining the concern is that if you do that, you're still going up against a large nation state that could take you out. But, and then you're looking at, forced retirements at some of these agencies that are happening right now, and so the resources are going to get even thinner. Is there a environment where we could credential third-party cybersecurity contractors who could be offensive, and that could be utilized by small and medium-sized businesses, again, credentialed by the government, bonded and insured, but also with liability protections that they would probably need to operate? It just seems, as Mr. Jimenez said, you're just getting punched in the face right now, and the best you can do is put up your hands and protect yourself, but you're not really able to punch back. And I don't know what the deterrent is on the other side if the U.S. government isn't able to punch back against all those entities. If the chairman would indulge me for this answer.
Absolutely.
This is something I'd want to take back to the sector. I think there's two concerns. You highlighted one of them, which is if you are punching back, now you are in effectively a fight with a potentially very well-resourced nation state. And as we talked about, many electric companies are resource constrained even on defense. EEI's member companies, investor and electric companies, have to be a little bit better resourced, but there's cooperatives and municipals across the sector as well. It could be that's daunting. So that's one set of concerns. The other is not quite in response to what you said, but an escalating cyber war perpetrated by the private sector might have some unintended consequences. And so it goes back to this being a team sport and the value of CPAC and the value of CISA 2015 and the value of industry-government partnership. Industry can be both defensive and resilient so that the attack may happen, but will still be operational. We would really rely, much like we would in any land war, on our government for it to be responsible for national security.
And I understand that concern. I guess the way I look at it, though, is it's not as if the resources that we have in the federal government are decreasing cyber attacks. It's actually going in the opposite direction. More and more people are getting hit. And I'll yield back, and I imagine Mr. Jimenez may go back to this.
Gentleman's back. I now recognize Mr. Jimenez from Florida for a second round.
Thank you, and thank you for the tag team. Here we go. Okay. Look, the only way that you're going to stop this is if the offensive party fears more the retaliation than what we do is just put up our hands and, gee, I hope you don't hurt me too bad. If you do that, just like nations go to war when they find somebody weaker, they're going to go to war and take it over. And they find you just sitting there, okay, please don't hit me. They're going to hit you because there's no repercussion for it. There's no consequences for their action. So everything we've done, have cyber attacks been reduced? Are they going down or are they going up? They're going up. So whatever we're doing isn't working. Why? Because there's no consequences to their action. And so eventually we're going to have to go on offense, and it's going to have to hurt them as much as it hurts you, or actually maybe hurt them worse than what they hurt you. And yeah, we in the federal government, we are not sourcing or putting up the necessary folks that it needs in order to protect you because it's such a big domain. I think that the private sector, with its resources, both in terms of people and money, is going to have to be the way to go. How much is cyber attack? How much is that costing you? How much is it costing you all to protect against it, or the damage that's caused by cyber attacks?
We're in the hundreds of millions of dollars of investment in cybersecurity technology and defensive capabilities. I will say that on the issue of what comes under the umbrella of active defense, there's a range of options. The most extreme one is letting private sector engage in hackbacks. I think the issue is government is doing something. They're empowered U.S. Cyber Command to engage in offensive capabilities. We would support them in any effort where we have certain assurances and there are guardrails. What we don't want to do is deputize a frontline practitioner to respond in haste to an attack where we may not have the right attribution, or there could be substantial repercussions. So this is an area that requires real close collaboration with Congress, with the intelligence community, with U.S. Cyber Command. I mean, we have to do that. I know.
The only way that you're ever going to be assured, okay, that it's not going to have dire consequences, is that you have to have mutually assured destruction. Okay?
The government can do that.
Well, I'm not sure they can, okay? And so, you know, that's what worked. That was, you know, the MAD theory actually kind of worked, because if you know that I can take you, if you do something to me, I can destroy you too, you probably aren't going to pull that trigger, all right? If the other side feels that they can continually just hammer you and keep you in business, because they want you in business, because eventually they want to have the revenue and all that. But eventually, when a nation state says, okay, we're going to do the knockout blow, and we don't have a knockout blow in response, they're going to knock you out. All right? And so I don't know the best way. Maybe it is that we do something where we have this cyber force. You know, we have the Space Force now we have the Cyber Force that has offensive capabilities somehow funded through industry, or we have a third-party, you know, entity funded by industry that is deputized or given a warrant whenever, you know, there is a retaliatory strike is authorized. Because frankly, I just see this spiraling completely out of control. So anybody have any comments on that?
I'll comment. I think what you're getting at is the need to use all the tools we have in the toolbox, whether that's offensive, defensive, diplomacy.
Yeah.
One of the things Robert actually noted is the need for greater operational collaboration between industry and government. Our firms will see things on their networks, but they don't necessarily have attribution that it is a specific national security threat actor. They would welcome a greater ability to work and share that with the appropriate authorities in government to get feedback on that. Oftentimes we think that there are things we see, there are things that government sees, that if we both knew what was happening, we could better direct some of our activities. I think that would be, to us, the next step to really try to drive at combating this where it's happening.
Mr. Chair, my last comment, I know I'm a little bit over time, is that it's going to be a everybody, you know, on board effort, the government and the private sector, just like we fought the last World War, all right? Everybody got on board and we're fighting, we're going in the same direction. I think that this is where it's heading anyway. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize the gentlelady from New Jersey, Ms. McIver, for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ranking Member, and to the witnesses for joining us today on a nice day. Thank you for being here. A strong and timely cyber incident reporting framework is critical to our national security, which I'm sure you've heard multiple times, and it's been mentioned multiple times in today's committee hearing. CISA must move quickly to establish a process that engages the private sector, aligns with existing regulations, and meets congressional intent, all without delay. But we cannot achieve this without a robust federal workforce. With staff and resources being cut each and every minute, it's crucial we support the personnel needed to get this done. In order to properly implement CIRCIA, make sure because the CIRCIA and CISA kind of gets me tied up, we'll need to have the staff and resources to process and analyze incident reports. I am concerned that any cuts to CISA's funding or staffing could leave it without the capacity to properly implement this crucial new program. To each witness, how important is it that CISA be adequately staffed and resourced to implement CIRCIA? What kind of funding and staffing is most important to properly implement?
I can go first, sure. I would say it's taken a long time to get up to this point where we have adequate staffing at CISA, and we're concerned about cuts to CISA. and what the impact will be, especially as they get more information like this. And as there is an effort to tie all the information together that they're getting from inside the government, from contractors, and this information together. Being able to analyze that's going to be a big toll, and it's going to take it's going to use a lot of AI, but it's also going to use a lot of human resources as well.
Thank you.
I would say it's beyond my purview in terms of telling the federal government how to organize themselves right now. But we will continue to engage them. And I think, for example, the partnership, if the rules are written in a way that is consistent with the intent of Congress, we could significantly reduce the amount of noise that would be generated in this information sharing process. And I think there would be opportunities for efficiency associated with getting back to that original intent. The other thing, I'm just going to use this as an opportunity to share with you, that we talk about incident reporting, but it's connected to incident response, and it's connected to how we engage on this in this process. One of the things I think we need and help with from you and potentially with ONCD is to have a single point of contact during a major crisis. Because right now, the experience has been we're getting inundated with multiple agency requests during the crisis. We're even getting multiple requests within a department. And then we're getting multiple requests to different parts of our operators, our network service providers. And that has to stop. We have to really rationalize that and ask ourselves some serious questions here about how to organize this effort, how to engage in the appropriate information sharing. And the last thing I'll say is when it comes to CECIA, there was an assumption that there would be reciprocity. And we still have that assumption. So the benefit of submitting information is for the government in real time or as quickly as possible to come back to us with mitigation guidance, new information on how to protect our networks. There's a lot of work to do here. And I'm hearing that there's a lot of alignment in this subcommittee around how to reduce the inefficiencies associated with all of this. So we look forward to working with you, and hopefully we'll be working with CISA shortly on how to remedy some of the infirmities in the CERCIA rulemaking.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Mayor. I would assume that getting one point of contact would not be that difficult. Thank you.
We certainly want CISA and CERCIA to be successful, and we are committed to that. For CERCIA to work, CISA will need certain capabilities, and that's not only technological, but also there is a human element to that. So we look forward to engaging with the new leadership once they are appointed and confirmed.
Thank you for that.
The only thing I'd add, so people, processes, technology are going to be critical to the success of CERCIA being implemented effectively. And let's not forget about the security of this really critical information. As incident reports are shared, that can be a roadmap to a potential threat actor. And so we need to make sure that we're not just collecting this information, but protecting it as well.
Thank you so much to each of you for those responses. With that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentlelady yields back. I now recognize myself for a second round of questions. Chairman Jimenez brought up before, the attacks are going up, and you agreed, but are successful attacks going up, or is the work that you all are doing on the sector coordinating councils and preparation and work with CISA, I know attacks are going up, but are we seeing positive results from all the information sharing and the work that you're doing amongst each other?
There are a lot of reports out there, and they say different things. So some reports I've seen tend to suggest that we are more successful, and that the bad guys, so there's just a lot more attacks, so therefore the number of incidents goes up with it. Some have shown that in certain areas there are more successful attacks than there used to be, and so then we have to move more resources over to those.
What you propose and what you're discussing is there's a counterfactual element here, in that we don't know what would happen in the absence of doing some of these activities. But I would say there's a lot of redundancy. There are a lot of reports that are produced within the government that, in our view, don't lend themselves to security improvements. So we have to get better at thinking about how we use government resources, how we use industry resources, focusing on what is the expected outcome that we're looking for. And that will fix, I think, a lot of the noise in the system.
Yeah, I think there are mixed signals. I think it's hard not to overlook the fact that we are increasingly being attacked by nation states. You have a private industry that has very strong, very powerful nation-state actors infiltrating their systems. Even the best, most sophisticated private firm is going to struggle to deal with that. So I will say I think our capabilities have certainly improved. Our information sharing has improved. We can respond faster when things occur. We, within the banking sector, continue to see certain challenges and weak spots with third parties or vendors that we rely on, things that cut across multiple sectors and can be embedded in your infrastructure. Those areas can still be very challenging to deal with.
I think Ms. Hogshead put it really well there, so I'll just associate with that. I'll give another example, though, of some really effective coordination that's happening where a nation state may be responsible for an attack. Private sector sees it, develops mitigation strategies, socializes those, and then works with government to kind of load the gun back for potential offensive operations should it become necessary. We've heard about all the different typhoons that are out. The Volt typhoon was something that was could have been impactful to the electric power sector, but because of industry being on the defensive and working with and across the Energy Threat Analysis Center and a lot of our partners in government, we're able to identify that, develop remediation strategies, and socialize those for the benefit of all electric power sector participants.
Thank you very much. I just want to say for the record, I am supportive of extending Cyber Information Sharing Act of 2015. However we get that done, whether we include CISA actually in the legislation of the text, who's the priority lead, I just want to make sure we get it in the front of the right committee in the Senate so it doesn't get bogged up like CFATS did. I also want to say that you all you lifted some grave concerns today with CPAC being disbanded. I mean, I've met with, Ms. Mayor, we've met on, and you've testified twice, you're the head of the Sector Coordinating Council. I've met with Ron Green, who's Financial Services, and Pedro Pizarro. They've already reached out, Edison International's already reached out to have a meeting. So I'm going to look into this and hopefully speak to the administration and try to fix this, because this is something we don't want industry not sharing information with us. We don't want industry not sharing information with each other, because when that happens, it just increases the vulnerabilities that are out there. And this is where I want to get to. There is a lot of, as Mayor, you said it, there is a lot of duplicative paperwork and rules out there. You know, the idea behind CERCIA was to get some harmonization on incident reporting, but that's not all we deal with. CISA doesn't really have the teeth, though, to force other agencies to do it. Who does? I mean, who do we have run the harmonization effort? I think you said ONCD before, but who's got the actual juice to make these agencies fall in line?
That's a great question. I'm going to
You can all go.
real quickly. So this is the problem. We have multiple agencies committed to a mission. Cybersecurity has become an interesting area for their involvement. A lot of it is duplicative. We think that the Office of National Cyber Director, consistent with its statutory responsibility to coordinate some of these responsibilities, can play a significant role going forward in rationalizing this effort. In the absence of that, we're going to be still dealing with all of these silos, multiple reporting requirements, and they're just going to be duplicative and not effective.
Yeah, at this point, I think we need White House level leadership, because that's really the top down to really affect change here. We are seeing some signs that it looks like the Office of Management and Budget may get more involved in this. So I think between OMB, Office of the National Cyber Director, which did do quite a bit of work on this to sort of socialize the problem, the Cyber Incident Reporting Council that you all authorized in CERCIA has put a lot of information out there. We just need someone sitting at the top to say, you guys need to rethink this.
And congressional oversight is incredibly valuable. I don't know what the number is these days, but at one point it was like 37 different committees and subcommittees had responsibility for cyber in some way. I think that work that you guys are doing to coordinate the cyber subcommittees across Congress and then work with the agencies of jurisdiction to also harmonize, there's value there too.
Yeah. I agree on the OMB and ONCD approach. I think that's the way to go.
Yeah, Chairman Green's doing a great job working with getting the committees of jurisdiction together. But yeah, I agree with you all. We need someone to be able to tell these guys to fall in line. We didn't really see that. We haven't seen that since I've been here. We need to keep up our oversight. But you know, I'll promise we're going to work on ex parte for the CERCIA rule. Hopefully, get that fixed. And we will continue working on harmonization. I know the committee is working on a report that we can hopefully get to the administration, and they can start acting on making your lives more focused on cybersecurity and not finishing a report. So with that, I want to thank the witnesses for their valuable testimony and for the members for their questions. The members of the committee may have some additional questions for the witnesses, and we would ask the witnesses to respond to these in writing. Pursuant to Committee Rule 7E, the hearing record will remain open for 10 days. Without objection, the committee stands adjourned.